She slammed her palm against the cold iron gate and screamed, "You don't belong here. This land isn't yours." Her voice echoed across the lake, sharp and bitter like she owned the water, the trees, the air itself. On the other side, the man in jeans leaned lazily. A smirk painted across his face as if her anger was his entertainment. He laughed loudly, pointing at the private property sign nailed to the bars, almost daring her to break it down. The suited man beside her tried to calm her, whispering something under his breath, but she brushed him off and marched forward. The other man in a blue suit raised a stack of papers high, waving them like a weapon. "We have the deed. You're trespassing," he shouted. But the gate stayed locked. The smirking man didn't move, and the woman's rage only grew. She yelled louder, "I'm the president of this HOA. If you don't leave now, I'll call the cops and have you dragged out." Her words cut the air with fake authority, dripping with entitlement. For a moment, it felt like she truly believed the badge of power she wore was real. But the man across the gate only tilted his head and said, calmly, almost too calmly, "Call them. In fact, I'd love for them to show up." His voice wasn't mocking anymore. It was steady, confident, and the way he said it made the suited man beside her stiffen. Something in his tone suggested a secret, something they didn't know yet. The woman squinted, suddenly less sure of herself, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. She whipped out her phone, dialed quickly, and barked into the speaker, "Send the police now! We've got a trespasser refusing to leave private land." The smirking man's eyes gleamed. He leaned closer to the bars and whispered, almost like a promise, "This is going to be fun." Red and blue lights cut through the trees within minutes, sirens echoing off the calm lake as two police cruisers rolled up the gravel road. The HOA woman straightened her blazer like she had just summoned an army. She pointed at the casually dressed man beyond the gate and barked, "That's him! Arrest him immediately. He broke into this neighborhood and refuses to leave." The officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts, scanning the scene. One of them frowned, glancing at the private property sign on the gate. The man in jeans didn't flinch. He simply folded his arms and smiled like he had been expecting this. The blue-suited man shoved documents toward the officers. "Here's proof," he said firmly. "The deed is ours." "He's trespassing." The woman's voice rose over his, dripping with authority she didn't truly have. "I'm the HOA president. My word is law here. Take him away!" The officers looked at each other unsure but moved closer to the gate. That was when the casually dressed man reached into his pocket slowly, carefully, and pulled out his wallet. The woman gasped, stepping back as though he had drawn a weapon. But what he held wasn't a gun. It was a badge. The silver star caught the flashing lights, gleaming against the night. The officers froze. The man's smirk faded, replaced by a calm firmness. "I'm Sheriff Daniel Cross," he said, voice carrying authority that was real this time. "And this land belongs to me." Silence slammed over the scene. The officers blinked, caught off guard. While the woman's mouth fell open, words stuck in her throat. The man in the blue suit lowered his papers slowly, his confidence crumbling. For the first time, the HOA president's fake power was met with something she couldn't control. Sheriff Cross stepped closer to the bars, his tone sharper now. "So you called in false charges against the rightful owner of this property? In front of real law enforcement?" The tension snapped. One officer turned toward the woman, his expression shifting from neutral to suspicious. She stuttered, trying to recover, but her hands trembled. And the sheriff's eyes, cold, steady, never left hers. The HOA woman's voice cracked as she tried to laugh it off, her anger now painted with desperation. "Sheriff, oh please! Anyone can buy a fake badge online. You think you can scare me with that toy?" Her words came out shaky, but she forced a sneer, glancing at the blue-suited man as if begging him to back her up. He nodded quickly, raising the papers again. "This deed proves everything. He's a fraud. Arrest him now before he causes more trouble." But Sheriff Cross didn't even look at the papers. He reached into his pocket again, this time pulling out a folded document with an official seal pressed in bold gold ink. He handed it directly to the officer nearest to him. The man studied it, his brow furrowing as he read. His partner leaned over, both sets of eyes scanning the details carefully. Then, without saying a word, they both stepped back, away from Cross, but closer to the HOA president. "This is signed by the county," one officer finally said. Property rights confirmed. Sheriff Cross is the lawful owner. The blue-suited man paled, his hand clutching the useless deed, trembling. The HOA president's face flushed red, her arrogance shattering as the weight of the truth crushed her performance. No, this can't be right. I run this neighborhood. We make the rules, she shouted, her voice breaking into a scream. But Sheriff Cross only shook his head slowly, his calmness sharper than any shout. You don't own people, and you don't own me, he said quietly, each word cutting through her panic. The mocking laughter she had dismissed earlier now burned like truth, echoing in her ears. The officers exchanged a glance, and one of them said firmly, "Ma'am, you may have just committed filing of a false police report." The words landed like a hammer. Her bravado crumbled, but instead of backing down, she lunged at the gate, gripping the bars with shaking hands. "You're lying! You set this up! You tricked us!" Her voice cracked, her eyes wild as though denial was the only rope she had left. Sheriff Cross didn't flinch. He leaned closer, his steady gaze locked on hers, and whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear. "This isn't a trick. This is justice. Catching up with you." The HOA woman staggered back from the gate, her breathing uneven, sweat shining on her forehead despite the cool night air. The suited man beside her tugged at her arm, whispering urgently, "Let's go. This isn't worth it." But she ripped her arm free, fury twisting her face. "No, he can't humiliate me like this," she shrieked, turning toward the officers again. "You're making a mistake. He's dangerous. I saw him threatening us." Her words cracked like glass, desperate, trembling. But her tone aimed to rewrite the story. Sheriff Cross didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small remote. He pressed a button and a large screen lit up inside the gate, facing the road. Grainy black and white footage filled the air with an eerie glow. The video showed the HOA woman earlier that afternoon, storming onto the property with bolt cutters in hand, trying to snap the lock on the gate. The suited man helped her, looking around nervously while she barked orders. And then, clear as day, her voice rang out from the speakers. "I don't care who owns it. I'll take this place by force if I have to. Once it's in my name, nobody can stop me." The officers froze, eyes wide, the evidence undeniable. The blue-suited man's knees buckled slightly, and he muttered, "She told me she had the legal rights. She swore it was true." His face drained of color, guilt etched across his features. The woman spun toward him, betrayal cutting her like a knife. "Don't you dare back out now! You're as guilty as I am!" she screeched. But he stepped away from her, shaking his head, his voice low. "No, you dragged me into this. I should never have trusted you." Sheriff Cross let the silence sink in before he spoke. "This is what happens when you try to steal what isn't yours." His voice was firm, almost cold. The officers exchanged a glance. Then one of them pulled out handcuffs, stepping toward the gate. The HOA woman's face crumpled into shock, her mouth opening but no words coming out. For the first time that night, she looked small, cornered by her own lies. Sheriff Cross folded his arms, his steady gaze never leaving her. "You wanted the law to show up," he said quietly. "Well, here it is." The clang of the handcuffs echoed louder, then her screams as the officers secured her wrists. She thrashed, kicking at the gravel, her voice breaking into raw shrieks. "You can't do this to me. I'm the HOA president. I control this neighborhood." But the more she fought, the more pitiful she looked, her words collapsing under the weight of reality. The blue-suited man, trembling and pale, stepped back until his shoes sank into the dirt, his hands raised in surrender. "I didn't know it would go this far," he muttered, staring at the ground. One officer gave him a sharp look and said flatly, "You'll have to come with us too. That video shows your involvement." His face crumbled, the last of his composure slipping away. Sheriff Cross stood silently, watching the meltdown unfold, his badge glinting against the flashing lights. He didn't gloat, didn't smirk. He simply let justice roll out in front of him. The HOA woman, still screaming, tried one last desperate gamble. "This whole town will side with me. Nobody trusts him. Nobody even wanted him here," she yelled, her voice cracking. Sheriff Cross finally stepped forward, his boots crunching on the gravel, and leaned close enough for his words to slice through her rage. "The difference is, I never needed them to fear me. I needed them to see the truth." The officers guided her toward the cruiser, her voice fading into the night. but her eyes burned with a fury that promised this wasn't over. The suited man followed quietly, his shoulders hunched like a man already defeated. For a moment, the lake returned to silence, the chaos dissolving into the hum of engines. Sheriff Cross stood alone by the gate, breathing in the night air. But just as calm settled, a shadow moved among the trees across the water. A figure in dark clothes stepped out, watching silently. His face was hidden, but his posture was tense, purposeful. Sheriff Cross's eyes narrowed, his hand brushing the grip of the gun at his side. He whispered to himself, almost like a warning carried by the wind, "So, it wasn't just her." Sheriff Cross locked the gate and turned toward the lake, his instincts sharper now. The night was too quiet, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant rumble of police cruisers fading away. His eyes tracked the shadowy figure by the tree line, but before he could call out, the man melted back into the woods. Cross's jaw tightened. He knew that walk, that posture, it wasn't random. Someone else was pulling strings behind the HOA president. Someone more dangerous. He pulled out his phone and dialed quickly. A low, gravelly voice answered. "Sheriff? Trouble?" Cross spoke softly, his tone edged with steel. "She wasn't working alone. There's another player. I want eyes on the property tonight." He ended the call, slipped the phone back, and walked toward his truck. Just as he reached for the door, headlights appeared at the curve of the gravel road. A black SUV rolled up slowly, windows tinted, moving like it owned the darkness. Cross froze, hand resting on his sidearm. The SUV stopped just short of the gate, engine rumbling deep. The window slid down, revealing a man in a sharp gray suit with an unsettling, calm smile. "Evening, Sheriff," the stranger said smoothly. "Quite a show tonight." Karen always did have a temper. Cross narrowed his eyes. "And you are?" The man chuckled, his tone dripping arrogance. "Let's just say I'm the one who funds this neighborhood. And you are standing on land I intend to buy." He tossed a sleek business card through the window. It landed in the dirt at Cross's feet. Cross didn't pick it up. His voice dropped, slow and steady. "This land isn't for sale." The man's smile never wavered, but his eyes hardened. "Everything has a price, Sheriff. You'll learn that soon enough." With that, the SUV rolled back, tires crunching on gravel, vanishing into the night. Cross finally exhaled, the weight of the encounter pressing heavy on his chest. He bent down, picked up the card, and read the name embossed in silver letters, Victor Hale, Regional Developer. His gut twisted. Karen had been dangerous, but Hale was something else entirely. And he knew this fight was just beginning. Sheriff Cross stood by the gate long after the SUV's taillights disappeared, the card still pinched between his fingers. The name Victor Hale rang like a threat in his mind, not because he hadn't heard it before, but because he had. Hale's reputation stretched beyond property development, rumors of backroom deals, shady acquisitions, entire neighborhoods swallowed overnight. Cross tucked the card into his pocket, his jaw tight. He knew Hale wasn't just here for land. He was here for control. The sheriff climbed into his truck, headlights cutting through the night as he drove back toward the lake house. Inside, his wife and teenage son were waiting. His boy rushed to the door, worry written across his young face. "Dad, we saw the lights. Is everything okay?" Cross forced a calm smile, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "It's fine for now, but things are going to get harder." His wife, strong and steady, stepped closer. "Was it Karen again?" He nodded slowly, but his voice dropped lower. "Not just Karen, someone bigger. Victor Hale showed up tonight." Her eyes widened, but she didn't flinch. "Then we'll be ready," she said simply, her tone carrying quiet strength. Cross looked between them, pride and worry tangled in his chest. He had fought battles overseas, had faced danger head-on, but nothing cut as deep as the thought of his family being dragged into this war. Later that night, as the house fell quiet, Cross sat alone on the porch scanning the tree line. The moon glowed over the calm lake, but his instincts screamed that calm was only the mask before a storm. A rustle in the woods caught his ear. He tightened his grip on the rifle leaning against the wall, his eyes narrowing. This time no shadow appeared, no SUV rolled in, but deep in his gut, he knew Victor Hale wouldn't wait long to strike. Cross whispered into the stillness, almost like a promise to himself. "If he comes for my land, he'll learn I don't back down." Morning broke with golden light spilling across the lake, but the calm didn't last. Sheriff Cross woke to the growl of engines outside his gate. From the porch, he saw trucks lined up, men in construction vests unloading, equipment as if they were about to tear the land apart. At the front stood Victor Hale, hands in his pockets, wearing that same cold smile. "Good morning, Sheriff," he called out smoothly. "Thought I'd get an early start on developing what will soon be mine." Cross walked down the gravel path, every step steady, his badge gleaming on his chest. "You're trespassing," he said firmly. Hale chuckled, waving a set of documents. "Not according to these? I bought out your neighbors. I bought the board. This land is already in motion. You can't fight money, Sheriff." But before Hale could take another step, more sirens filled the air, this time louder, heavier. County cruisers rolled up behind the trucks, lights blazing. A state official stepped out, holding a thick folder. He raised his voice for everyone to hear. "Mr. Hale, we have evidence of fraud in your acquisitions. Forged signatures, illegal contracts, false permits." Gasps rippled through the workers as the official handed the folder to the deputies. Hale's smirk faltered. "This is a mistake," he snapped, his voice losing its polish. Sheriff Cross stepped closer, his tone low but cutting. "You thought this was about money, but it's about the law. And you forgot. The law stands with me." The deputies closed in, cuffing Hale as his truck stood idle, his empire collapsing in front of his eyes. The workers stepped back, some even nodding toward Cross in quiet respect. As Hale was led away, shouting empty threats, the sheriff turned to face the lake. His wife and son had come out onto the porch, their faces lit with relief. Cross walked back to them, his voice steady but full of warmth. "It's over. This land stays ours." His son grinned wide, pride gleaming in his eyes. His wife slipped her hand into his, whispering, "You fought for this country, and now you fought for this home." Cross looked over the calm water, the reflection of the flag on the porch fluttering in the breeze. "I didn't serve to be told where I can't live," he said softly. "This is our land, our freedom, and nobody takes that away."